Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
How many of you have noticed my lazy eye? It's really not a lazy eye. I don't have a strabismus, but I injured my eye a few years ago, and for some reason the eyelid just doesn't come all the way up anymore. I swear it's not from my stroke. Welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. We are breaking news to you today that you won't hear anywhere else, and it's really important news. And of course, the only person that ever breaks news on my show is Anthony Roberts. And we've got something exciting. And historically, Anthony and I did more shows about peptides back in 2006, around there, before anybody even paid attention to peptides. The first show we did on peptides was GHRP6. The second one was IGF-1, then IGF-1 long R3, and so on and so forth. So we've been talking about peptides way before anybody thought they were popular. And rightfully so. We have some damaging news to all of those doctors and peptide gurus out there that we're going to talk about in just a minute. Before we do that, we have to thank our title sponsor. And that's Legendary Foods, makers of the sweet rolls. If you want to eat something that is reminiscent of a Cinnabon, but without all the guilt, check out the sweet rolls from Legendary Foods. They've got cinnamon, they've got chocolate, and they've got wild berry. You'll swear you're eating garbage, but you're not. 1 gram of sugar, 20 grams of high-quality protein, 5 net carbs. And while you're there, pick up their answer to a Pop-Tart, which is called the Tasty Pastry. Again, less than 1 gram of sugar, 5 grams of net carbs, and 20 grams of protein. Your kids will love them, so make sure you get enough for them as well. shrnetwork.biz/legendary. Use the code SHR10 just to let them know that you learned about them here on Superhuman Radio. Without further delay, let me get my guest on. A guy I've probably had on this show more than any other single person in the world, Anthony Roberts. How you doing, Anthony?
Good. How you doing?
So you and I really did start talking about peptides in 2006. There's a lot of gurus out there who talk about peptides today, and we're literally going to piss in their Cheerios today. Sadly, but
I've never liked that. Sort of someone comes up with a thought, right, and then your career is talking about this other guy's idea. It always struck me as kind of weird. Like our friend Chris Bell, right, was like for me, it's the first guy to talk about carnivore diet, right, on Rogan.
Yes.
Now people build whole careers off this kind of, thing
yes.
Chris is doing since a teenager.
Right, absolutely. And he's rocking it now. He's been living up there in Davison, California with his kid brother Mark, and he like walks 30,000 steps a day. He is not using any kind of opioids or opiates of any type. He's pain free. He looks amazing. He's really doing great. I gotta applaud Chris for what he's doing.
Yeah, for sure. I was out there in January, with Chris for about a week. Yeah, he's doing great, killing it.
Very, very good. Let me just adjust something here. I have a green screen. Thank you. That'll get rid of all the green halo. Anyway, so Anthony texted me yesterday in traditional Anthony style. I once said that Anthony Roberts was the pit bull of journalism because when he locks onto a topic, he doesn't let it go. And especially if there's fraudulent activity involved. Anthony is a master at FOIA. He gets all sorts of stuff through the Freedom of Information Act that other people can't get. So he texted me this yesterday, and I'm actually aware of this semi because I remember when it first came down in 2020. So let's start there. In 2020, TaylorMade received a cease and desist because they were making every single peptide you can imagine available to through their compounding pharmacies to physicians and telling them, use it as an off-label. So that kind of was domino one, where the FDA went, oh, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Yeah, so let me round that out, right? So in 2009 was the Biologics Price Competition Innovation Act. And what that did was moving forward, they really only implemented it in 2020, and TaylorMade, as far as I know, was the first casualty. You had to get a biologics license application for anything with, I believe the alpha subunit is, an amino chain of 40 aminos or longer. So that's anything that's that length, you had to get this license for, right? And that's basically every peptide, right? So they went after them. They got them for everything: MK677, GHRP2, maybe AN6, LR3, and so 2020 was really when people should have said, "Oh, wait a minute." Now that they got a Form 483, right? That's an inspection. So the mechanism at work here is if you're producing something that doesn't fall under the list of things that can be compounded by a compounding pharmacy, then they have to comply with every other requirement of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, FDCA. So if you're a compounding pharmacy and actually compounding something that's legitimate for that purpose, you get certain exemptions in terms of CGMP, labeling, and FDA approval, right? So certain things that are listed, for example, in a USP or NF monograph, but aren't FDA approved, you can compound. These don't fall under that exemption. These are biologics. So at no point were they legal to compound ever.
And really, the first casualty, the actual first casualty of all that, was human chorionic gonadotropin, which was HCG. The manufacturers of HCG said, you can't compound this. This is patented, it's protected, and if it doesn't come from us, you're infringing on us. And if everybody complained, oh, I can't get HCG from my compounding pharmacist anymore, I've got to buy, whatever the brand name was. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think, so you have private industry enforcing, right, their rights, and none of these other things, right? I mean, basically none of the others. Like LR3 is approved, but a lot of these other ones just aren't approved at all, right? AOD 9604, that's not approved, right? MOTC, that's not approved. So there's nobody to say, hey, you're infringing on my rights here. You're infringing on my property right, my patent, my intellectual property, whatever. Without that, we have, unfortunately, only the FDA left to do it, right? So they got TaylorMade. The industry itself cleaned up the HCG problem because that was taking money out of people's pockets. And we really haven't seen enforcement other than private enforcement, probably ceased.
But let's make sure we're clear on something. So enforcement, meaning that it has been illegal all along for compounding pharmacists to be selling BPC 157, Dimethyltryptamine beta 4, but they've been operating anyway just because there was no enforcement, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, like, I'm sure a bunch of compounding pharmacies are going to say, "Oh, it became illegal September 26th of 2023." That's not true, and it's not even true that it became illegal in April of 2020. It was always, right, since the 2009 Act. As soon as that was implemented, it was illegal. And I'm not entirely sure how a doctor is writing a valid prescription for something that's illegal to make. I don't know how that works, other than these doctors know, hey, I know this pharmacy, this compounding pharmacy, who will make this for me. Right? They circumvent.
How is that any different than a UG?
I don't know. It's not. I mean, well, remember Richard Rodriguez from Florida was just a UG. He was a UG right, that claimed to be an HRT clinic.
Right.
So it's not that bizarre. The thing that's bizarre is, so why would the FDA take this particular step, right? To say all this stuff's illegal and it was never able to be compounded. Now it's illegal as a biologic. Now also we're going to list it specifically, right? And say, don't compound this. And I think that's because a lot of enforcement's about to come.
So does that mean enforcement of the research chem guys too?
Doubt it. Doubt
Yeah.
it, because this is
Well,
compounded.
let's talk about them later, because that's a whole nother
Sure.
subject that I know you're very. I mean, Anthony's written books about this stuff, so this is really a great interview. So let's talk more about this. So right now, there is a handful of guys out there who consider themselves peptide gurus. They're authoring books that are teaching doctors how to use these peptides to help their patients. They're charging tens of thousands of dollars to be certified. You know, there's these organizations. Jeremy Delk had one, but he let it go when TaylorMade got hit. Jeremy Delk had to clean up his act completely because he also had his fingers in the thoroughbred horse racing industry with peptides. And so he just was like, F it, I'm done. I'm not doing anything with peptides. And he had back then the International Peptide Association. I forget what it was. It was like the authority that doctors were going to be trained. Like those organizations, like if you're teaching people to homebrew GHB, you know, and saying, well, it's good for your people to sleep better. Aren't you enabling illegal activity then?
Yeah. So if you get together, yeah. So it's going to be some species of of aiding and abetting, or if you're involved with them, it's going to be some species of conspiracy, like a 371 conspiracy, because by going through these pharmacies and circumventing insurance, right? All these HRT clinics, like, we don't take insurance. Yeah, that's because they don't want anyone to see what's going on, right? Like so, they don't take insurance. They're circumventing this. It goes straight from the doctor to the clinic, right? You can't take that prescription to Walgreens, right? So, yeah, what they're doing is, obviously some kind of conspiracy, because it's depriving the FDA of their lawful function.
So and not to overlap discussions, but right now, if you are a physician recommending, prescribing, using a third party organization to fulfill on peptide prescriptions, you should immediately send a letter out to every patient and say, we're not doing this anymore. Sorry. Because let me tell you a short story. Aaron Singerman is a good friend of mine. He's like part of my family. And they received a letter from the FDA to cease and desist. And they were like, well, we got inventory. Let's just get rid of it. That's why he ended up doing time, because they said, well, no, when we said not to, you didn't do not to. So if you're a doctor right now, or a peptide guru, that you're teaching people how to prescribe these peptides, you should absolutely send a letter out in very strong terms saying, we don't do this anymore. These things are illegal. To cover your own ass. What do you think?
I wouldn't want to give any advice where someone sends a letter now where they cop to having done this. And I also wouldn't give, for example, any advice that says, hey, dipshit, delete all your videos and, maybe pretend you didn't do it and hope you get overlooked. That might be what I would do, but I wouldn't advise anyone to just pretend it never happened.
So that opens me up too, because I've been talking about peptides for a long time. I usually have an expert on talking about them, but I probably should remove all of those peptide interviews that I've done.
I think you're pretty safe. I think First Amendment stuff is pretty clear. These other guys, I don't. If I were a doctor working for maybe one of these larger, or working with one of these larger clinics that's been doing this for years and left a huge digital imprint, I'd be nervous.
Yeah.
Because it's so. What this does, let's say the FDA wanted to bust you a year ago. They would have to take you to court and say, GHRP2 has an amino acid chain that's longer than 40 in the alpha subunit. That's a factual matter, right? That's a factual matter that has to be proven. Mm-hmm. If it's on a list and you sold the thing on the list, that's going to go right to summary judgment. That's going to be, hey, judge, right? Here's the list. Here's the thing they sold. There's no factual matter for the jury to adjudicate, right? So this makes it very easy for the FDA to have slam dunk prosecutions wrapped up very fast.
Yeah. So it's troubling what's going on. And I also want to go on the record of repeating something I've said 1,000 times on this show, that peptides are not the miracle drugs that the people who are making big money and promoting them make them out to be. I have had people come to me on this show who have been to the really expensive peptide seminars, were taking a dozen or two peptides, still felt like shit. And I looked at that, I was like, oh shit, do this, change this about your diet, fix your sleep. And it turned out that they didn't need those peptides. So I just got an email from a guy yesterday asking me what peptide is good for somebody who has liver problems. None. Like, it's the shit you're eating and drinking that's going to fix your liver. So we have to also put an end to the, right now there's people wringing their hands going, oh my God, what am I going to do without my peptides? Chances are you're going to be fine. Now it's going to force you to find what was really causing your problem in the first place. That's just my opinion.
No, I totally agree. My favorite, right? My favorite analogous situation is, I'm taking a ton of steroids. What other drugs should I take to combat the side effect from the steroids? Less steroids. Stop taking as much as you're taking.
Right.
Right. It's not like, you get to add all these other drugs, like back off on the doses. Right. It's common sense, but they don't want to do that. They want the thing to fix the problem that's caused by the other thing they're doing. So they don't want to stop.
Right. Right.
And it's ridiculous.
So talk about why you feel like the research chemical guys are not necessarily going to be attacked as a result of this.
Yeah. So they're really low hanging fruit, right? Those are the kinds of companies that are operating basically out in the public. I actually spoke to Oliver Catlin via email, and he directed me to it's kind of an obscure website, and I'm sure no one's heard of it. Amazon, I think I'm pronouncing that right.
Who is Catlin? Who is he?
Oh, he runs the Banned Substance Control Group. He is also the son of Don Catlin. I'm pretty sure the anti-doping lab at UCLA is named the Catlin Anti-Doping Lab.
Oh, okay. So he said go to Amazon, he said, right?
And yeah, he sent me a link. And I mean, BPC is on there. It's wild, right? And so that means the government hasn't even sent Amazon a letter that said, hey, this stuff's not right, not allowed. So that tells me that the gray market sites are probably safe for now. When Amazon gets that letter and then the credit card processors get the letter, then they're going to have a problem. But for now, this seems like they're going to, hopefully go after the bad actors in the compounding world.
So I noticed in the list, they specifically word it where some of them are by injection. So what does this do for the intranasal and the eye drops and the transdermals? What does it do? Because you're an expert at this stuff. The transdermal is a drug delivery system. You can't just call it topical, right?
Right. So what does this do in well, first of all, are you asking what does it do? What is transdermal? I know you know the answer.
No, yeah, because I used to homebrew. But
yeah.
No, they have like one of them, I can't remember if it was CJC 1295 and it said injection specifically. Some of them had the word by injection specifically. So that means like, okay, as long as you're not injecting it, maybe you can still do something with it.
So, right. CJC 1295 is a synthetic analog of growth hormone releasing hormone, right? And it's got one of the problems with it is that it's got what they call an unnatural amino acid. That's just a D amino acid, right? It's not like something that doesn't occur, right? It's the other racemate from the one we generally consider to be the active amino acid. It's right. It's not the L one. When you go to the GNC and you buy L-leucine.
Right.
Right. That's the one we generally consider to be active. So unnatural is a bit weird. They claim there's some problems with immunogenicity and serious adverse effects. And in this one in particular, there's some vascular problems, I believe. It increases heart rate, right, unacceptably. The idea that that's CJC, right? That's what you have there. Where they list something like injectable, that's probably the only data there was. So they don't know what the pharmacokinetics of a different form of administration. So in no way does that, open the door for guys who think they're smart to start selling intranasal or intraocular or suppository or whatever. Right? That absolutely doesn't open the door. It's just that they're saying we know this for sure in terms of the method of administration.
And obviously that they all of this is under the guise of safety with the FDA. But at the same time, you juxtapose that to the implementation of release of an mRNA vaccine that we've had like a couple months of research on. So is this really about safety, or do you think this is the FDA doing a grab on behalf of the pharmaceutical industry until they can get their hand around peptides and peptoids? They even have different nomenclature now for what could be coming.
Well, I mean, a lot of these have sort of been we'll use CJC as an example. That was abandoned in phase 2 of FDA clinical trials because of a death in the study group, right? So it's doubtful. Conjachem, right? CJC stands for Conjachem.
Right. The Conjac, the company I made its name was Conjac.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's where the nomenclature comes from. It's doubtful that they're gonna ever release an FDA approved version of this. Given the fact that they, as far as I know, halted clinical trials due to that death.
But what about? Wait a minute. Let's stick with this. So. Yeah. The peptide industry has this fun thing that they do. You exposed in an article on Medium maybe 8 years ago that all TB500 was actually thymosin beta 4, but they call it TB500 because TB500 is supposed to be desirable because it's this portion of the domain of the peptide that supposedly has all the good benefits. And you had all these samples mass spec. Talk about that, because then I have a question I'm going to ask.
Well, so I think it was Mario Thevis, right, from the German anti-doping lab. He's also the editor for one of the anti-doping journals. And what they did was just they took a bunch of the, once again, low-hanging fruit, right? When you Google TB500, right, you're going to get Google ads, or back then you would have gotten Google ads. I'm not sure if they still allow them. And they tested them, and, barely, I don't know if any of them came out to be legitimate.
Right.
That's if you're not getting right, if you're one of these research chem companies and you're not sending these things off to get third party tested, and it's expensive for these sort of obscure molecules. If you're not sending them out, right, if you're just slapping your label on them, which is far easier to do, and it's far more intrusive in terms of your cash flow if you have to embargo, right, your last shipment until you get the test back.
Right.
If you're not doing that, you just kind of at the mercy of, Sinochem or whoever you get it from in China.
Right. Okay, so now let's move to this comment and question. So CJC 1295 was a long-acting secretagogue because it had a portion of it was designed to attach to albumin in the blood and stay active for up to 7 days. It had the diminishing power over that 7 days, but it stayed active for 7 days. And that's really where the problems were, because like most long-acting secretagogues, like the ones they give men to shut down testosterone production, when you take a gland that's designed to pulse and say, no, just step on the gas pedal all the time, the subjects in the early studies developed anxiety because and diminished response of growth hormone because the pituitary wasn't designed to work that way. So now we have CJC 1295 with DAC and CJC 1295 without DAC. And CJC 1295 without DAC isn't CJC 1295. It's actually, what is it? 1 through 29, modified growth factor 1 through 29 with a little, it's not, they changed the names because people are too stupid to read and understand this stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, also you have to keep in mind that's part of the FDA process, right? In terms of approval for bulk drugs, if you were to look at the USP, or NF monologues, you would find identity, right? So you would see this is the exact structure, this is the exact amino chain. You would be able to identify these things, right? And then they would tell you this is a crystalline, clear structure, right? So you'd be able to see if the raw, right, was matched what it was supposed to be, and it would give you sort of quality expectations. But when you don't have that, when you just kind of hoping the guy in China that you just Western Unioned $1,000 to is honest, like that's not happening. It's a totally different ballgame.
Right. It's I just find it humorous that the peptide suppliers today, not pharmaceutical companies, they change the name to fit the idiot on the other end buying its expectations. It's like if they would say, no, you want modified growth factor 1 through 29, he'd be like, no, I want CJC 1295 without DAC, without the drug affinity complex. It's like, okay, it's the same thing, but that's not what my friend told me at the gym. It's like, it's just humorous to me that they change the names of these compounds to fit the expectation of the buyer and not to be honest and true.
And so, right, in the original studies on SARMs, right, you had a bunch of different companies. SARMs, by the way, are also not legal to compound. When you had the original studies on SARMs, let's say they had one study had 12 SARMs and the other study had 5 SARMs, right? And they're comparing their efficacy. And the first SARM is called SARM1 in one study, or S1. And in the other study, the first SARM they looked at was not the same one as the prior, right? These are temporary name holders. S1 was not an official name. It was just the first SARM in a particular study. It's not the first SARM in every study. So when you talk about, I looked up the research on S1, those are all different SARMs. They're not the same thing. S1, S4, they're not the same thing from study to study. So people don't understand that. And for a while, there was just absolute chaos over what SARM was what until people started using, LG, 4033, right, which is Ligandrol, the company.
Right.
It was madness. And that's from not understanding the study,
Yeah. So what do you think is going to, somebody has a question here. Let's see. Is Alpha Lab on Amazon's website legit company for quality peptides? Can we even answer that? Like, how do you know unless you're seeing their mass spectrometry research results?
Yeah, I honestly don't. I honestly don't keep up with the various, we'll call them UG, but research chem labs. Like I don't keep up with who's the awesomest research chem lab because I don't have a ton of faith in any of them, and it's not where I want to be.
Right. So what do you think I mean, you've interfaced with the FDA, the DEA through all your research. I know you know some of these people on first name basis. What are they going to do? You think we're going to start seeing legitimate pharmacies that are filling prescriptions today called on the carpet?
I think for sure, when not because anyone told me anything, but I think for sure when you look at how easy it is now to secure a conviction, right, versus how difficult it might have been 2 years ago, I think now that the mechanism's in place, I think this is a prelude to enforcement. So I think you're going to see a lot of companies getting charged criminally or having to pay a fine and enter into a consent decree not to sell this stuff.
Someone emailed me or messaged me on Facebook. I'm going to try to see this while we're talking, and said that we need to sign this petition to save peptides. I mean, this isn't something that the FDA is open to comment by the public. I mean, it's done, right? They added these to the list, and all the emails and cajoling from the public. Oh, this saved my life. Which Thymosin beta 4 did save my life. It really, really did. I can honestly say that when I had my stroke. But nothing will turn this back now. Will they? Is there a commenting period right now?
No. This wasn't a public notice that's open for comment, which is what you see in the Federal Register. When they tried to outlaw kratom, right? The DEA had posted emergency scheduling. That's not what this is. This is people said, right? People have already had their say is one way to look at it, right? So, University of Maryland at Baltimore, they submitted, let's say, GHRP2. They submitted multiple drugs that have been denied here. So they submitted it. They said, here's our white paper, here's 200 pages of data, blah, blah, blah. And the FDA said, all right, no, we don't think this is safe for a compounding pharmacy to make. So the people have already had their say, right, is the way to look at it. Mm-hmm. Like, a bunch of signatures on a petition is not going to override the 200 pages that University of Maryland already submitted in support of the drug. So on the one hand, I would say the people have had their say. And on the other, I mean, if you want to, write up a petition or you want to get funding for additional safety studies, I mean, some of these drugs have never been tested in humans. So that's a non-starter. We're never going to see the FDA reverse course on that. So, but if you want to try and get more funding for it and raise awareness, there could be a time in the future.
Would you be surprised to see pharmaceutical companies step forth because they can afford? They've got the pockets. They could afford to do phase 1, phase 2 trials and do all the research. Do you think they're going to step forward on some of these peptides that seem to really have some rescue benefits in humans?
I mean, just from a financial incentive point of view, it might be for them better to just wait 10 more years and let patents expire and then do their own studies. I don't see anything happening too soon, and I don't see, much of a reason for a company to buy out a smaller company that's failed in phase 2. You just wait for the patent to expire and then start doing your own tests or whatever.
It's funny. We did a show many years ago with a doctor who came on and talked about sabinitide, which was also known as ARA290. And the company that patented the purpose of use. What do you call that when the application patent, right?
Use patent. Yeah.
Use patent. They did a use patent where it reversed small fiber neuropathy, and 28 days at a certain number of milligrams a day, and it was very successful. And everybody went out and got it. Everybody used it, and it didn't work. And it didn't work because of what I said a little while ago, because they didn't stop doing the thing that gave them small fiber neuropathy in the first place. So it's like, buying a peptide because you have liver problems, heart problems, and taking it without removing the insult first so the peptide can actually speed healing is like going to Porter Paints and choosing the color of the walls that you want to paint your living room while the house is on fire. It's like, you wouldn't do that. That's stupid, right? You'd put the fire out first and then paint the walls after you rebuild the whole fucking house. And that's what people need to understand about peptides. The reason that so many people are disappointed about peptides and because they fail, they don't do what they promised to do, because they're still doing the stupid things to their body that gave them the issue in the first place. But with that being said, the company that had the use patent, the application patent for sabinitide, contacted me and said, take that show down. We're going to sue you. That is a patented product. Compounding pharmacies can't make it. And I took the show down because they threatened me. They threatened to sue me because they said I was I was trying to influence interference of their patent, and I took the show down because I didn't want to get sued.
Yeah, GTX Pharmaceuticals, they made some of the SARMs that are popular. They did the original studies and have the patent. There must have been a website that had posted a ton of my articles from like 2006 that had to do with SARMs, and they sent me some kind of cease and desist. It wasn't my website. They wanted me to get this down off the website. I never replied, but they also, I believe it was GTX. They ran to the FDA, and when we saw all those busts, I think in 2016, 15, 17, they ran to the FDA and dimed out everybody who was selling their products as dietary supplements. So when we saw those busts, those are directly from GTX filing trade complaints against those companies.
Yeah. So how would you like to summarize this discussion? I mean, obviously, we're probably going to start to see some of the bigger pharmacies who have been in the peptide space. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to help anybody. But we're probably going to start seeing them. At least they'll first receive a letter, right? A cease and desist letter.
There's no requirement that FDA does that, right? So a lot of these places are hoping for a cease and desist, but they might just get a bunch of FDA OCI agents showing up to their door and raiding the place. There's absolutely no requirement that they get a warning first.
Interesting.
So I think some of them are going to be on the wrong end of a raid, right? I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, the list of drugs that now are specifically not allowed to be compounded by name is tremendous. It's basically everything that these, whatever you want to call them, vitality clinics are promoting. So, I mean, there are 25, Oliver told me this, Oliver Catlin told me there are 25,000 HRT or anti-aging or vitality clinics in the country. So it's just, the most egregious ones will probably go down first, and the compounding pharmacies that are associated with them. And, the FDA will hope everybody got the idea, but it's just such a layup of a prosecution. I think we're going to see a lot of it.
I would not stock up on them unless you have a life-threatening disease and you have a peptide that's keeping you alive. I wouldn't do it. I remember back in the day when pro hormones, everybody went out and bought, ADs, all the pro hormones that were available when the pro hormone bust started coming down. Everybody bought raw powders and they have them still today. They don't take them. They're keeping them for what, I don't know. These peptides have a shelf life. Even if you keep them frozen, they start to degrade. And really, your freezer can't keep them frozen to the degree that they need to be frozen in order to be stored long term. And if you're using them, you're going to use them up. You're going to use them, and then it's going to be over. Find a way around it. I did a show. Find a pork processor in your area, upstate New York, a guy who raises pigs, and buy sweetbreads. It's the thymus gland. It has every thymic hormone in it. You got to soak it in milk. You got to find an old world recipe for it and make stew out of it. And there you go. There's thymosin beta 4, thymosin alpha 1, thymosin alpha 6. There's every single thymic hormone in there. There's workarounds. Like you can do that. You can buy that. But I wouldn't just start stocking up on the stuff. I just wouldn't, because you're breaking the law on top of it. Like, who really wants to go to jail? Raise your hand. I don't. I know I'm not going to speak out of school, but some of us have been to jail, and we know that it sucks pretty bad, especially in other countries.
Yeah, no, listen, it's you bring up sort of the most salient point, I think, is that these are biologics, right? So you have to reconstitute them, right? They're lyophilized, so they're powdered, and these aren't like, pro hormones or anabolic steroids. They have a far, less robust stability, and their shelf life is nowhere near like you can't buy 10 years worth of HCG, right? And have it be useful 10 years from now. Now, I don't know how many years somebody would want to stock up on these things, but the shelf life just isn't the same. It's not that kind of drug.
Yeah. And give it time. I'm sure the pharmacies are gonna they see this business. They're not gonna turn their nose on it. I mean, the pharmaceutical companies. They were already working on something called peptides, which were going to be synthetic versions of peptides, so that they could patent them and control them. Give them some time. After a period of time where they're not available, then you're going to start hearing about them being available through your physician and legally made by a pharmaceutical company. They'll come back around. They're not going to throw them under the bus if they really work. And if people are willing, think about it. People are spending literally thousands of dollars a month on peptides and with no insurance. And you don't think that pharmaceutical companies are going, we need to get into the peptide business once all the dust settles. I bet.
Yeah, I mean, people are clamoring for stuff that failed safety and efficacy tests and got dumped in stage 2 and never went to human trials. There's gonna be better stuff out there, right? These are the dregs, right? These are the things that weren't good enough to be. I mean, for the most part, right? Some stuff did make it to market, LR3, obviously, but for the most part, these things just. Half of them didn't make it to market. There's a reason for that. There's something better out there, or there's something better in the pipeline. Yeah, there's a reason why after investing millions of dollars, a company will pull the pin and say, "All right, we're not going to bother with this."
Right, because it didn't work. That's what happened with MK677. The same thing that happened with the CJC 1295, long-acting secretagogues. They don't work for growth hormone. They just don't. They work initially, and then people get messed up. The other thing I wanted to mention was AOD 9604 used to be called fragment 121 177. Do you know what I'm talking about? It was the growth hormone fragment that was supposed to be associated with fat loss.
Yeah, right, because AOD stands for anti-obesity drug.
Right, and the AOD 604 used to be sold under fragment 177 196 or something like that.
Yes, yeah.
And here's the thing that people don't understand about it. It only works if you take 200 micrograms 6 or 7 times a day. Like, seriously?
Is that a sub-Q shot?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like there's some interesting stuff like, MK677, which I think that's an interesting one because while it only elevates GH for 24 hours, it elevates IGF for like a week or something, right?
Yes.
Like there's like a huge disparity between how much it elevates IGF versus GH. So
and it improves appetite in elderly people because remember it's a ghrelin. So the elderly people who have a hard time eating and become frail, like half a milligram or up to, I think some people say 25 milligrams, but even 4 or 5 milligrams a day makes them eat like animals and they grow and they get strong again. So there's a lot of
helps with sleep. Helps with sleep. There's some stuff on there that's interesting, right? Melanotan obviously is on there, and kisspeptin, which is works on the hypothalamus. I mean, there's a lot of things on the list that intellectually I'm interested in because the hypothalamic action or the MOTS-C, right, that works on the mitochondria.
Mm-hmm.
There's a ton of things on the list that are interesting, but we're just not seeing them really, really work as well as what we already have on the legitimate market.
They're not miracles. Yeah. They're not miracles. And everybody thinks they're miracles because they're being told by the peptide gurus out there who have a vested interest in getting you to attend their seminars that they're miracles. And just for the record, the research on semaglutide keeps coming out. Now it's tied to thyroid cancer. I have talked about semaglutide and GLP agonists, several different shows that they're harmful, they're dangerous. But the more there's guinea pigs out there called you that are using it to lose weight, and it's doing a lot of harmful things. But there's other people out there saying, well, you're not using it right. Bullshit. You're not using it right. Why is it giving people thyroid tumors? Why is it giving people digestion problems that last for months and months after they stop using it? Gastric paralysis of the stomach. I mean, these drugs, they were never meant to be 5 days long. They happen in pulses. When you start taking something that was designed to pulse and make it constant for 5-6 days at a time, the body doesn't like that. Just doesn't like it. It's not natural.
Yeah, no, I agree. When you look at something, even, when we talk about something like testosterone, right? That's secreted in a pulsatile manner. So it's very odd when people will say, oh, I'm taking a replacement dose. And it's like, yeah, but that's not how your body normally maintains its testosterone. Like that replacement dose, yeah, and now you're going to go on a diet, and guess what? You maintain steady state testosterone levels. So there's no catabolic effect, right? The guys that, and you see like some, ex-professional bodybuilders say, well, now I'm just taking a replacement dose. And they try to infer that they could somehow have achieved that on a replacement dose, or that a replacement dose is somehow indicative of their hard work. It's like, no, you're maintaining. This is a different thing.
Right.
And it's not just replacement. The pharmacodynamics are completely different. Right. Just because your level is the same as maybe someone who's natural doesn't mean that it's affecting you the same way. Yeah. It's just not secreted like that.
So you heard it here first. Let's see what happens. Let's see what pharmacies start going down in the near future. And if you start seeing that, that when Anthony Roberts talks, the truth comes out. And it's been great having you on the show today again, of course. Are you still shooting?
Yeah, I am. Yeah. It was great pulling you out of retirement, by the way.
What's that? I know. I haven't done a show since last week. I got my head up my ass with Gun Leash. We're launching this month. We're going to start selling probably in a week or so.
Nice. Glad to hear it.
Anyway, thanks for being here. Thanks for throwing this my way. Thanks for letting the show put this out there. Don't forget to share the show with your friends. Let them know what's going on. All the fresh news comes from me. Just nobody hears it. That's all. That's it. I'm the Rodney Dangerfield of fitness podcasting. I get no respect at all. All right. Good seeing you, Anthony. Thanks a lot, brother.
Good seeing you, Carl. Thank you.
Thanks to those of you who watched today and you're here. We'll probably have a lot of shows next week. It's Elisa's birthday this week, so we're going to North Carolina for a couple days and staying in the Smoky Mountains in a cabin. But we'll be back. Oh, wait, we got a comment here. Let's see. No respect, baby. Sean Watson. I know, right? Sean, we're launching, brother. Sean was one of the original investors in Gun Leash. Thank you. All right, that's it. We'll see everybody soon. Take care.